She told everyone at a backyard barbecue. He's sweet, but sweet doesn't create an interesting life. I smiled politely, helped clean up after dinner, and quietly went home alone. Nearly a year later, those same guests were sharing my success story in their group chat without knowing she was reading every message. He's sweet, she says, laughing lightly. But sweet doesn't create an interesting life. A few people laugh. Cooper doesn't. Beckett looks down at his plate like it just got very interesting. Sloan, our host, glances at me for half a second too long. I'm standing right there, 6 feet away, holding a stack of paper plates I was about to throw in the trash. She knows I'm standing right there. I understand immediately that this isn't a joke. Jokes have a target that's in on it. I am not in on this. This is a ranking, delivered in public, dressed up as something funny enough to survive in a backyard at golden hour. A statement disguised as banter. He isn't enough, and now you all know it too. I smile. I don't remember deciding to smile. My face just did it, the way you flinch before you know you're falling. I finish throwing away the plates. I go back to the cooler and start loading empty bottles into the recycling bin like that's the most pressing task in New Jersey that evening. Nobody says anything to me about it. Not that night. Almost a year later, the same people standing in that backyard would spend an entire evening in a group chat, typing paragraphs about me, sharing a link, tagging each other, saying things like I always knew he had it in him. They wouldn't remember saying that. I would. But that's later. That night, I just helped clean up, said goodnight to everyone, and drove home alone, because Hadley was staying to help Sloan with the rest of the dishes, or so she said. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. We'd been together 2 years by then. We'd talked about moving in together that fall. We'd looked, with a realtor and everything, at a 2-bedroom place near the train station so I could get to the city faster. Her mother had started saying, when you two, instead of if you two. I'd met her grandmother twice, which in her family was apparently a milestone with its own gravity. I loved her, not in the abstract, performative way people say it at parties. I loved the specific things, the way she narrated movies under her breath, the way she always ordered dessert and then ate exactly 3 bites of it and pushed the rest toward me, the way she used to text me during her commute just to say the train was delayed and she was bored and thinking about me. That version of her existed. I'm not rewriting history to make this easier. She was real, and she loved me too, for a while, in the way she was capable of at the time. But somewhere in the last 6 or 7 months, something had shifted, quietly enough that I kept explaining it away. It started small. A comment about how Beckett's girlfriend's company had just gotten written up somewhere. A comment about how Presley's boyfriend had taken her to Tulum for her birthday. Not jealousy, exactly. More like inventory. Like she was cataloging other people's lives and measuring ours against the total. I noticed she'd started introducing me differently. Early on it was, this is my boyfriend, he's a software guy, he's brilliant, ask him anything. By that spring it had become, this is my boyfriend. Full stop, like the sentence used to have more words, and she'd quietly trim them. I didn't say anything about any of it. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself relationships evolve. The intro fades. That's normal. That's just 2 years in. I didn't realize it then, sitting in my car outside Sloan's house with the engine running and the porch light still on behind me, that the barbecue wasn't the moment everything changed. It was just the first moment I let myself see it. The thing about a comment like that is it doesn't announce itself as a turning point. Life just keeps going. I drove home. I texted her get home safe like I did every night. She replied with a heart emoji 40 minutes later. Nobody at the barbecue brought it up to me directly. Sloan didn't pull me aside. Beckett didn't text me a hey, you good, that night. The silence afterward was its own kind of answer, like everyone had simply filed it under things Hadley says and moved on, because that's what you do when something's been normalized long enough. That, somehow, felt worse than if someone had laughed in my face. 2 days later, Cooper called me. Cooper and I had been friends since college, the kind of friend who doesn't call just to chat. If Cooper's calling, something's on his mind. You good? He asked, no preamble. Yeah man, why? Sloan's barbecue. The comment. I told him I was fine. I told him it was a joke. She does that. It's nothing. I heard myself say it, and some part of me registered that I didn't believe a word of it. Cooper was quiet for a second. Then he said something I didn't expect. For what it's worth, that's not how it landed in the room. What do you mean? I mean it didn't land like a joke. Beckett said something to me after you left. He thought it was kind of brutal, actually. said it didn't feel like the first time either. That last part stuck. Not the first time. I hadn't heard her say anything like that before, not in front of people. But Beckett apparently had, which meant there'd been a version of this happening that I wasn't even in the room for. I told Cooper I appreciated the call. I didn't tell him how much it had actually rattled me, that somebody else, somebody outside the relationship, with no reason to lie, had heard the exact same sentence and walked away with a colder red on it than I'd let myself have. Once I let myself look, I couldn't stop finding more. 3 months before the barbecue, we'd been at dinner with Sawyer, a guy I worked with, and his wife. Sawyer had asked what I was working on, and I'd started explaining a project I was genuinely proud of, a system I'd built that had saved my team a stupid amount of manual work. Hadley had cut in, smiling, to ask Sawyer's wife about her recent trip to Portugal instead. Not rude, just redirected, smooth as anything, like my sentence had run its useful course. There was the time Presley got engaged, and Hadley spent the entire car ride home talking about the ring, the proposal, the rooftop, the photographer Presley's fiancé had secretly hired. And somewhere in there she said, almost offhand, "It's just nice when someone really goes for it, you know? Makes an effort." I'd said something like, "Yeah, that's sweet." And she glanced at me in a way I couldn't quite name at the time. I can name it now. It was appraisal. Presley, if I'm honest, didn't help. She had a way of asking me questions that weren't really questions. Any big plans coming up? Delivered with a tilt of the head that made it clear she already knew the answer was no. She'd ask Hadley about other people's boyfriends with this bright, eager energy, then ask about me like she was checking a box. I don't think Presley was malicious. I think she just reflected Hadley's own quiet rankings back at her, amplified, the way friends do when they're more invested in your story matching a certain shape than in your actual happiness. I kept giving Hadley the benefit of the doubt because the alternative was unbearable. The alternative meant admitting that the woman I was planning a future with had started keeping a private scoreboard, and I was losing. Then, about 6 weeks before the barbecue, I overheard something I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd come back early from a work trip and stopped by her apartment to surprise her. Her door was cracked, and she was on the phone, with Presley, I assumed, from the rhythm of it, and I heard my own name in a sentence that wasn't cruel. That was the strange part. It wasn't an insult. It was just dismissive, the tone you'd use describing a show you don't really watch anymore, but haven't bothered to cancel. I mean, he's great. He really is. He's just, I don't know, predictable? Like, I know exactly what every day with him looks like for the next 10 years. She laughed a little when she said it. Not a cruel laugh. A tired one. I didn't go in. I stood in the hallway for a second, then I knocked like I'd just arrived, and she opened the door with this genuine, warm smile, happy to see me, and I let her hug me, and I didn't say a word about what I'd heard. That's the part that still sits strangely with me. Cruelty I could have fought. Dismissiveness, delivered with real affection underneath it, is much harder to argue with. How do you confront someone for sounding bored of you in a tone that still loves you? I didn't. I filed it away. And 6 weeks later, she said the same thing out loud, to a backyard full of people, dressed up as a joke. I gave it about 2 weeks after the barbecue. I wanted to be sure I wasn't reacting to one bad night. I wasn't. I asked her to talk on a Sunday. No plans after, just us at her place. I didn't plan a speech. I just told her what I'd heard at Sloan's and asked her, plainly, if that's actually how she saw me. She didn't deny it. I'll give her that. She didn't lie to my face. "I don't think you're not enough," she said, which is the kind of sentence that tells you everything by what it doesn't say. I think I want, I don't know, more. More excitement. More, I don't know, ambition, unpredictability. I look at where I want my life to go, and I don't know if it looks like this. There was no screaming. No one cried. Not really. Her eyes got wet once, and she wiped it away almost immediately, like even her sadness was being managed for effect. No cheating, no betrayal I could point to and say there. That's the villain of this story. Just a woman calmly explaining that the life she wanted required a different kind of man, and the life I'd been building, steady, present, mine, wasn't going to be enough no matter how much of it I gave her. And somewhere in that conversation, it clicked for me that the barbecue comment hadn't been a slip. It hadn't been wine and bad timing. It was the one moment her private scoreboard had gotten loud enough for other people to hear. Everything else had just been quieter versions of the same math. I didn't beg. I want to be clear about that, because I think about how easily I could have. I could have promised to be more spontaneous, more whatever she needed. Some part of me, the part that had spent 2 years building a future around her, wanted to. But another part of me, quieter, steadier, recognized that you cannot argue someone into finding you interesting. You either are, to them, or you aren't, and pleading just confirms the very thing they've decided about you. So I told her I understood. I meant it, too, in a strange way. I stood up, and I left. She said, as I was at the door, "I don't think this has to be, it has to be, like, forever forever." I didn't answer that. I just left. I found out later, through Cooper, that she'd told people we were on a break, not broken up. I think she genuinely expected I'd circle back eventually, chastened, ready to try harder for whatever version of exciting she was after. I never did. The first few months after were not cinematic. Nobody should pretend heartbreak is. I went to work. I came home. I didn't see most of the friend group much. It had always skewed toward her orbit more than mine, which I hadn't fully clocked until I was the one who'd left it. Cooper checked in regularly. Beckett texted occasionally. The rest mostly went quiet, the way mutual friends do when they're waiting to see which version of the story sticks. I didn't post anything. I didn't write some big caption about growth or self-respect. I just started doing the small, unglamorous things that don't make a good highlight reel. I started running again, early mornings, because I needed somewhere to put the restlessness. I picked back up a side project I'd shelved over a year earlier, a tool I'd built initially just to solve a problem at my own job, something that automated a reporting process that used to eat a full day every week. I'd mentioned it to Hadley once, early on, excited. She'd said, "That's cool," and changed the subject to a wedding she'd been invited to. I'd let it die after that. I don't think I noticed at the time how much I'd let die. Sawyer, from work, was the one who pushed me to actually finish it. He'd used an early version, loved it, and kept asking when I was going to clean it up and show people. Eventually I did. He introduced me to Everett, a guy he knew from a previous job who ran a small but growing logistics company and had exactly the kind of reporting headache my tool solved. I almost said no when Everett floated the idea of building it out properly for his company, on a contract basis, on top of my regular job. It felt like too much. I was tired in the kind of way that makes ambition feel like a luxury you can't afford. I said yes anyway. I think some quiet, stubborn part of me needed to find out what I was capable of when nobody was around to call it predictable. It wasn't fast. I want to be honest about that, because the version of this story where everything blows up overnight isn't the version that actually happened. For months, it was just evenings and weekends, Everett's project running parallel to my day job, mistakes and rewrites, and one stretch in February where I seriously considered quitting the whole thing. Sawyer talked me through that stretch over 2 beers and a lot of patience. But it started working. Everett's team adopted it fully. He mentioned it to another business contact of his, who reached out cold, asking if I could build something similar for them. Then another. By summer, I had 3 small clients on the side and had started seriously considering whether to go out on my own. I also started taking care of myself in ways I hadn't in years, not out of vanity, just out of finally having room in my own head to notice myself again. I slept better. I ate like someone who planned to be around a while. I started seeing a therapist, not because I was in crisis, but because I wanted to understand why predictable had landed as deeply as it did, and what I actually wanted my life to look like now that I was the only one choosing. Cooper noticed before I did. "You seem different," he said one night. The 2 of us at a bar that used to be a regular spot for the old group. Lighter, maybe. I don't know. I didn't feel dramatic about it from the inside. From the inside, it just felt like getting up every day and doing the next true thing. By early fall, almost a year after the barbecue, I left my job and went out on my own, full-time, with 4 clients already lined up and Everett as an informal advisor who kept introducing me to people. I wasn't trying to be seen. That's worth saying plainly, because what happened next could easily read like I'd orchestrated some big reveal. I hadn't. I was just building something and building things in public, a few posts about what I was working on, a profile update, a small write-up in a local business newsletter Everett's contact ran, happened to be part of how the work actually got done. A tech reporter doing a piece on small logistics software founders found the local write-up and reached out for an interview. I almost said no to that too. Old habits. But I did it. The piece ran in late fall. It wasn't viral in some explosive sense. It was a solid, well-written feature in a regional business outlet, the kind of thing that gets shared a reasonable, respectable amount. A podcast that covered small business stories picked it up a few weeks later and had me on for 40 minutes. I didn't think about Hadley while any of that was happening. I want that to be clear too. This wasn't built as a message to her. It was just my life, finally moving under its own power. But mutual friends saw it. Sloan shared the article. Beckett texted me, "Saw this. Insanely proud of you, man." Cooper, predictably, had already read it twice before texting me anything, just so he could ask better questions. And then, the way these things do, it ended up in a group chat I wasn't part of, the old barbecue crowd, the same people who'd been standing in that backyard a year earlier. I only know what was actually said in that chat because Cooper, months later, half apologetically, showed me the screenshots. He felt weird about it, he said, but he also thought I deserved to see it. It started with Sloan dropping the article link with a string of exclamation points. Then Beckett, "This guy? Seriously? So happy for him." Then Presley, of all people, "Wait, this is him? I had no idea he was working on something like this." The thread kept going for almost 2 hours that night. Someone brought up the podcast. Someone else said they always thought I seemed like I was quietly building something. Cooper, restrained as ever, just sent, "Told you guys." And then, about an hour in, Beckett wrote, "Remember Sloan's barbecue last summer when H said the sweet thing line LOL." While there was a pause in the thread after that, a long one, Cooper said, "Almost 20 minutes with no messages," which in a group chat that active basically counts as stunned silence. Then someone, Sloan I think, wrote something non-committal like, "People change I guess," and the conversation drifted elsewhere, back to the article, back to congratulations. Nobody in that chat knew Hadley had been added to it months earlier, back when things between her and the group were still warm, and nobody had ever removed her. Cooper said he didn't even think about it until after the fact. She was just a name in a long list of names, quiet, easy to forget was there. But she was there, reading every message in real time, the way you do when a notification pulls you in before you've decided whether you want to look. I don't know what that felt like for her. I've thought about it, and I've decided I don't actually need to know. She texted me about 10 days after that group chat conversation. I almost didn't open it. Old habits cut both ways, and for a second I braced for an argument, a justification, something I'd have to manage. It wasn't that. It was short. She said she'd seen the article. She said she was proud of me, and that she meant it, and that she'd been sitting with something uncomfortable for a while now, which was the realization that she hadn't been wrong, that I had more in me. She'd just stopped being someone who could see it. She said she was sorry for the barbecue, specifically for saying it in front of people, for letting predictable become the whole story she told about me when it had never been the whole story at all. She didn't ask for anything. No "can we talk?" No opening left ajar. Just an apology, plainly stated, and then nothing else. I read it twice. I felt something, but it wasn't triumph, and it wasn't anger either. Mostly I felt a kind of quiet that I imagine is what closure is actually supposed to feel like. Not loud, not cinematic, just the sense that a door I used to check compulsively had finally, gently, shut on its own. I didn't write back anything dramatic. I thanked her for saying it, told her I wished her well, and left it there. I didn't need the apology by the time it arrived. I think that's the part that would have surprised the version of me standing in Sloan's backyard a year earlier, holding a stack of paper plates, smiling at a joke that wasn't one. He needed her to take it back. I just needed to have already moved past needing anything from her at all. The people who laughed at that barbecue remembered my story long after they'd forgotten her joke.